What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. First live stream in a long time, and I don't think I've went live since I think draft time, something like that. So it's been a while, but I wanted to come tap in with you guys, talk a little Steelers football, a little training camp battle, some off-season expectations. I want to kind of get a little temperature gauge on where you guys are at with the team. Anything y'all want to discuss. Y'all can drop comments, questions in the chat. But I appreciate all you guys tuning in. Just a quick update with the channel. Really appreciate everybody showing the love. I mean, we had a really, really good month, especially coming off the draft. I'm trying to, come up with more ideas on different things I can do to kind of help you guys and myself kind of pass the time until, football season really gets rolling here. So this is kind of what I refer to as the dead period of the NFL season, post minicamp, post OTAs, up until we get to Latrobe. I'm thinking I'm going to be able to make it to Latrobe at least for a couple of days, hopefully next month. So I'll be able to share with you guys directly from there, and I'm excited about that. So, again, appreciate you guys tuning in. Just to make sure I sound okay, because the audio sometimes on the live stream can be a little wonky. If y'all don't mind, drop me something in the chat just to make sure I sound good. And then we'll kind of get started. I got some, different positional battles I want to cover before I answer like any questions or anything like that. Jarrell, your critical breakdowns are enough. Appreciate you, my guy. Appreciate the support on the channel. One idea, if you can find Morgan State tape for Graham. Man, I know we had Graham on the show or on the channel. I'm sure that you guys have already seen that if you're asking about that. Um, yeah, I'm really excited about Alfonso. I'm interested to see, how he does in training camp as well. Have not been able to find any Morgan State tape. I've exhausted a lot of resources into the tape ground, but that was one that I was unfortunately unsuccessful in. So if I get it, I'll break that down. Let me know if you guys, a couple people have hit me up about, I'm going to probably say his name wrong, about Barku, the XFL guy, the corner. Let me know if you guys want to see that, because I've had a couple people ask me about it. I'm down to do it. I have his preseason tape from this past season with Jacksonville, and he played, I think, 30, 40 snaps or whatever. So I'm down to break that one down if you guys want to see that. Robert, are you going to have Steelers players or former Steelers players on the program? Stay tuned. Yes. I've got some things in the works, man. I don't want to. Some things I can go ahead and talk about, some things I can't. But in terms of like the interviews and stuff, I think they're a nice little switch up to, the film rooms and stuff like that. The film rooms are always going to be the absolute, the meat and potatoes of the channel, man. That was the whole reason I went to YouTube. I think it's an easy way, a digestible way for me to get that type of content to you guys. I think it does better in video form than it does in, articles or anything like that. So it's the real reason I did the channel. But interviews, yeah, I'm down to do that. I'm sure that you guys probably already saw, but I had one of the best pass rushers in the nation, Princely, from Florida, come on a couple or last week or whatever. I've got a couple big time college football players that I've been in talks with about getting them on the channel. It's really just about scheduling. I have another Steelers player that I'm trying to get on in the dead period as well. So I don't want to promise too much interview type stuff, but I'm working on that kind of stuff as well. Just again as a switch up to the film room stuff. Uh, Appreciate you guys. Appreciate my guy Stanley. Stanley always showing love on the videos. I appreciate it. I want to see Barku. I don't even know if I'm saying his name right. So if I'm not, I'm sorry. But I will definitely break him down if you guys are down for that. Maybe I'll try to get into that this week. This week's schedule, I've got some Mark Robinson clips that I've already started putting together for a video. So there's going to be a small Mark Robinson breakdown because I feel like there's a lot of buzz kind of around him and his potential this upcoming season. So wanted to break him down before we get too far along. My guy James tapping in. Rank the Steelers offensive lineman 1 through 5. Man, that's a tough one. I think 1 through 5 for me. I think Daniels is 1. Samalo would be 2. Oh man, it's probably tough. I think Chooks and Mason Cole are probably in the same range, and then we probably get to, whatever Dan Moore or Broderick Jones kinda bring to the table. I don't wanna talk too much about, expectations for Broderick, just because I don't know how far along he's gonna be. I'm excited to see him in training camp. He's gonna get a good test. I mean, um getting to see Alex Highsmith every day is going to be a good thing, and even if he is running with the second team, he's going to get to see Marcus Golden. So those are going to be good tests for him. But I think definitely Daniels and Samalo are 1 and 2 for me. I put out a list today on the All Steelers site of my top 10 players on the Steelers entering 2023, and I think Daniels was 7 and Samalo was 8, and it was hard ranking those guys, to be honest with you. They're very good players. But yeah. Richard, what's up, there? Do you expect Robinson to be here for a little more than just this year? Are you talking about Allen Robinson or are we talking about Mark Robinson? If you're talking about Allen Robinson, I would be surprised if he was here for longer this year just because of his cap hit next season. But I do think that, I think the Steelers would like to keep him around. Maybe if he gets released and comes back. I don't know. I think it depends on if Robinson has a bounce back season too, and what he could potentially get on the open market. But Allen Robinson, okay, yeah. I mean, we'll see, man. I'm optimistic about Robinson at least bouncing back and playing well for the Steelers this year. What happens moving forward? Uh, it's gonna be tough, man. Like I said, with that cap hit next year, it's gonna be difficult. George, appreciate the breakdowns. I appreciate you for showing love to the channel. Assuming the Steelers keep 5 receivers, who is the odd man out? Let's see. So the top 3 are definitely locks: Deontay, Pickens, and Robinson. I'll say that Austin has the best shot, provided he's healthy. So I think Austin makes the team as long as he's healthy. That's a big key, though. I know there's been some quotes I saw today saying that he still wasn't like 100% running wise. I don't know if that was taken out of context or whatever, but I've seen that all over my timeline. I think that's interesting, man, because I've talked a little bit about that on the pod too. It's difficult, man. Those Liz Frank injuries, man, those are not good injuries for skill position players. I'll just say that. It's tough. I've talked to players that have tried to come back from that, and it's a difficult one. Um, I still think Miles Boykin, because of his special teams acumen, has a really good shot. I think that, it would probably be down to like Hakeem Butler, Fitzpatrick, Steven Sims. Are those guys going to be able to provide you enough on game day to get a helmet if they're not contributing on special teams? That's always the big tiebreaker, for guys that are at the end of the roster. So they get between those guys. Let me know if you guys want to see some Des Fitzpatrick stuff. I think I have some college tape of his I can break down. Hasn't really played very much in the NFL, but wouldn't be opposed to breaking him down. He's from the Ville, which is where I'm from, so I like that. Showtime, are you going to training camp this year? Yeah, that's the plan, man. My wife's pregnant, so travel is a little bit sketchy right now, but I am going to try to go for at least a couple of days, even if it's just, a weekend trip or something about that. Um, but yeah, I'm gonna try to go. I enjoyed my time last year. That was the first time that I had been able to. I was the first Steelers related thing I think I'd been credentialed for. So that was kind of cool, getting to interview players and be on the field and stuff like that. I definitely want to go back. It was fun, and just getting to see the actual practices. That was awesome. So yeah, got a great rookie offensive tackles on a curve for sure. How about Riley, the DB we have? I think you're talking about Elijah Riley. Yeah, I watched that Raiders game. He played a decent amount in that one. Um, wasn't overly impressed. He did have one blown assignment that I thought should have probably been a touchdown if Derek Carr didn't miss the throw. But yeah, I might be. Well, I mean, I'm down to do pretty much anything, man. I got a month to spare before we really you know, get into the season. I'm excited about that. Let's get into a little bit of the training camp battles. I think training camp battles, man, along the trenches on both sides, I think they're pretty much set, right? Hayward, Highsmith, Hayward, Ogunjobi, and Watt. Those are your front four starters on defense. I think the offense is set as well. Chooks, Samalo, Cole, Daniels, and between Jones and Dan Moore. Listen, even if Dan Moore wins the job, he's going to be on a pretty short leash. I mean, that just is what it is. You don't draft a tackle, much less trade up for a tackle, just to sit him all his entire rookie season, unless Dan Moore just goes out and plays phenomenal, which I'm rooting for him. Hopefully he does, but I think that we're going to see Broderick Jones sooner rather than later, whether he's ready or not, to be honest with you. So, not really any positional battles that I'm really looking forward to on that front. But I did want to talk a little bit about the receivers. I use Calvin Austin as the thumbnail, so I figured we start there. I do think Allen Robinson's going to get the lion's share of the time, the snaps in the slot for the Steelers this season. Just when I was watching, him with the Rams, I think that there are definitely some things to like about Robinson. He's very, very good against zone coverage. Smart player, understands how to defeat leverage, find the soft spot in zones. I think he's going to be very quarterback friendly for Kenny Pickett. Everybody who's watched Robinson since his days at Penn State knows how well he plays above the rim. He's always been a high contested catch guy. He's really good in the red zone. So there's a lot of things to look forward to there. I do think that they'll continue to, every now and again kind of throw Deontay in there. Maybe Pickens gets a little bit of time in the slot as well, but I think that those reps are primarily going to belong to Robinson. Now, Calvin Austin's kind of the wild card here, right? Like I said, if he's healthy, I think the Steelers want him to be a part of this offense. It's just a matter of, can his body hold up? Is he going to be ready to roll? And can he survive, at what he's playing at? And I think it's fair after the rookie season. The Liz Frank injury was out of his control, but even getting Calvin, a couple touches a game, like 1 to 2 touches, I think is worth it just because of his speed. It definitely brings a different element and he adds a different dynamic than really anyone else on the Steelers can. That dude can straight up fly. I'm excited to see what he can do if he's given the opportunity. And one thing about Austin, you can go back and watch the breakdown. This dude's more than just a gadget player. I know that I've been guilty of it. Everybody has probably been guilty of saying, get this dude on jet sweeps and screens and underneath stuff so he can create yards after the catch. Like, this dude was really good against press in college. I mean, there are some obvious deficiencies and things that he's not going to be able to overcome at his size, but he has really good feet. I mean, really good release package at the line of scrimmage. Obviously, the speed is, to burn. I think that he could use a little bit of work as a route runner, but this dude's more than just, your typical, light gadget player. So I'm excited to see what he looks like. I think, how much of Robinson's snaps could he potentially eat into kind of depends on how well, he plays over the summer and then how healthy he is, if he can stay on the football field. So I think the tight end group is interesting as well. I wrote about that a couple of times in the past couple of days for the site, but you got Pat Freiermuth. I think honestly, like, I'm kind of classifying Darnell Washington as a starter in this offense. I think they're going to be in 12 personnel a good amount, man. I think you look at what they did last year. They want to be really run heavy. I think the Washington pick is signaling a shift to more 2 tight end sets, even more so than last year. And Washington adds that dynamic. He's the best blocker on the team, technical refinement aside. He's a really good complement to what Freiermuth already does as a receiver. And then, I think that there's an interesting battle to be had between Zach Gentry and Connor Hayward. Hayward was a 6th-round pick last year, had a really successful rookie season. He was a key contributor on all 4 special teams phases. So I'm interested to see, if he can maintain a role within this offense with all the other guys coming back, Calvin Austin getting into the fold, them adding Darnell Washington, adding Allen Robinson, what's his role look like this season, if anything? And then, Zach Gentry, I think he's going to lose a lot of his snaps and potential value really to Darnell Washington. Does he bring enough as a receiver to maintain a roster spot over a guy like Hayward? Or do the Steelers just keep them both because they don't really have a traditional fullback? Could they just keep them both and say, all right, Hayward's the fullback in the very rare scenario where we actually use one and keep 4 tight ends? I don't know. I mean, would you rather have the 4th tight end or the 6th receiver? I think it's an interesting discussion in terms of roster building, from a roster building standpoint. But yeah, those are the 2 offensive ones. I don't really think, the RB3 spot. I did a video on Anthony McFarland on the channel. If you guys haven't checked that out, check that out. But I think he's probably the leader in the clubhouse. McFarland actually looked pretty good to me in limited time last year in the preseason and when he got the chance to play against the Colts. Again, we talk about speed from Austin. McFarland looked a lot more confident in his vision. And he looked a lot more decisive as a runner last season. I'm excited to see how that pans out. Speaking of training camp, I went to training camp last year and I watched McFarland in 7-on-7 and team drills, one on ones. The Steelers didn't have anybody at the linebacker position that could cover him. I mean, he was cooking Devin Bush, he was cooking Miles Jack, he was cooking Robert Spillane. In hindsight, that probably should have, set off more alarms than it did, even though I didn't really have high expectations for the Steelers inside linebacker group last year. But he cooked all those guys. I mean, they couldn't cover him out of the backfield. And it was interesting to me seeing him that Colts game because they were doing some interesting stuff in terms of letting him get out of the backfield, running actual routes. They were trying to get him on like Texas routes and into the flats and stuff like that. They designed a little halfback screen for him. So interested to see what he looks like. Already talked about Alfonso Graham. Excited to see what he looks like when pads come on. That RB3 spot, definitely something to keep an eye on as the season rolls around. Get to this one. What will the secondary look like when the Steelers are in sub this year? I think it's two different things, right? We got to talk about the early down nickel and then the passing situation nickel. So, the early down nickel, I'm not really sure what it's going to look like, man. I'm very interested to find out. It's the number one question for me. Peterson's been very open about, moving around on defense. What does that mean? I'm very, very excited to see for myself. I think there's a lot of guys that could potentially work their way into that spot, right? Without Arthur Millette in there. That early down nickel that's belonged to Mike Hilton and Arthur Millette in the past have been primary run stopping guys. So do they play a guy like KZ there? Does Keanu Neal play there? Do they move Peterson in there? I just don't think Peterson's going to be able to play there full time, 100% of the snaps. I don't think that that's what they want him to do. I don't think that's what he was brought here to do. But I think that you have to have other options other than Peterson too, because I think that at this stage of his career, there's going to be some matchups that he's not going to fare very well inside on. So I'm very excited to see what happens. I think that that's probably the one position, slot corner, that I just really question what the direction is. And maybe it works out. I don't know. I mean, every year it seems like there's always that one position on defense where I just kind of tilt my head a little bit, like what are we thinking here? And that's the one this year, I think, for me. But I think they've got enough talent on defense to make it work regardless. But it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. I think when you get into passing situations, though, Peterson can kick inside as long as you're not playing, heavy cover one or anything like that. I think he can, kick inside, and that's a way that you can get Joey Porter Jr. on the field, out there on the boundary as well. So I got George. Do you think Neal will get snaps at dime linebacker and maybe more? Yeah, I do. I think that Keanu Neal can definitely get snaps as a dime backer. When the Steelers went into some dime last year, there were times where they would almost line Terrell Edmonds up as the dime backer and then drop him out. And, his athleticism allowed them to do some creative stuff in terms of their disguises and things like that. I think Neal can definitely do some of that stuff too. He's a pretty good athlete, especially if you're categorizing him as a linebacker. But definitely a guy that's better off in the box than working deep or anything like that. But he's at least somewhat functional, I think, or functional enough, and too high looks to play there as well. I think it's interesting to see what the distribution of labor between him and KZ is going to be. When KZ was in the game last year, he played a good amount of center field. He was playing a lot of too high. He's a gambler, so he's a guy that, likes to play deep and then kind of work top down, whereas Neal's kind of the opposite. He's a guy who's much more comfortable the closer he is to the line of scrimmage. I think it's interesting because do we think KZ is going to start? Like, do you guys think KZ is going to start in terms of talking 3-4 base personnel? Is he going to be the strong safety with Minka? I just think it's something to talk about because, KZ is only about 78 pounds or 180 pounds, something like that. He's really light. I just think a box safety, you think of the guys that the Steelers have put in that spot in recent years. I mean, I know Terrell was massive for a safety. He's like 220 pounds, but not saying you have to be that to be a box safety, but I'd be kind of surprised if KZ was actually going to do that on a snap to snap basis in base. If he was going to be able to hold up in there, taking on blocks, things like that. I think it's difficult at that weight, but um, in terms of the defense, man, I think the other interesting kind of battle is what's going to happen at linebacker. A lot of people, I feel like there's been a lot of articles in the past couple weeks kind of dogging the Steelers inside linebacker situation. But to me, I'm not really too worried about it just because I feel like the expectations for that group in recent years has been so bad and so low that I almost feel like it can't get any worse than what it's been. You know what I'm saying? So to me, I'm not super concerned about it. I think Holcomb is a good athlete. He can roam sideline to sideline. Um, he's a guy that plays pretty well in space, so I like that about him. Um, who they're going to pair with him is interesting. Landon Roberts, I think that he's that traditional kind of throwback downhill thumper type. One thing about Roberts that I think is interesting is he blitzed a ton last year. I mean, he's really blitzed a lot over the course of his career, whether it be with New England, Miami, whoever, because that's just the type of player he is. You get him matched up on a running back in pass pro, and he'll run him over. But he's not at all functional in pass coverage. I mean, he's just not at all. You don't want him out there. So it's interesting to me if he's on the field. Are the Steelers going to blitz more? Are we going to see less four linebacker sets in sub packages? I mean, when he's out there, is he going to be allowed to blitz more? The Steelers don't blitz their inside linebackers very much anymore. So he's somebody to watch. Um, like I said, I have a Mark Robinson video coming up. Probably going to drop on the channel tomorrow. So y'all be on the lookout for that. I'm not going to talk too much about Robinson just because some of the stuff I'm going to talk about is going to be repetitive if you're going to watch the video tomorrow. So, but I think he could potentially play in there. Tanner Muse is kind of interesting. He's a good athlete. Former safety, has a little bit of coverage chops. Pretty quality special teamer. Could definitely make the team. Um, the cornerbacks, we talked about this earlier on the pod. Apparently, there's been a lot of people speculating that maybe Levi Wallace could be a trade candidate. I think that that's kind of crazy. Honestly, if you watched the pod this morning, I kind of was a little bit shook up about that. Maybe Wallace could be had later in training camp or right before the season if Joey Porter Jr. is just lights out in the preseason and training camp, or maybe Corey Trice Jr. is so good that they just can't keep these guys off the field. But Wallace is a quality starter, man. He's not. I'm not saying he's like CB1, or he definitely doesn't have the potential maybe that some of the younger guys do, but he's pretty reliable last year. I mean, there were some times where I felt like he got lucky on some poor quarterback throws where maybe could have affected his numbers a little bit. But career high in interceptions, I thought he was solid. You can't ever have too many quality cover men, especially in an AFC North division where you got to worry about Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Amari Cooper, those guys. So I don't think I'd be in too big of a hurry to trade Levi Wallace, even if he is on the last year of his deal. Even this is the most excited I feel like I've been about the Steelers' depth at corner in a really long time. I already talked about Trice. Big fan of his talent. Think that he could definitely make, not just make the team, but I think that has potential starter traits just with his size, length, the way that he moves and carries his weight. I like him a good amount if he's healthy. And, even James Pierre, man, like I went back and watched, the Raiders game. He was a big part of shutting Devontae Adams down. Granted, they gave him a lot of help in that one, but I think that Pierre has a place on an NFL roster. I don't know if that's with the Steelers this year or not, but he's going to be a tough dude to just cut. He's a guy who's very comfortable in press, has a little bit of size to him as well. Quality special teams guy. That's always a deciding factor for those guys at the bottom of the roster. So he's going to be a difficult dude to just kick out. So I'm excited to see what it is. I still think if the Steelers are going to add a piece, maybe a training camp kind of a veteran cut that gets released surprisingly from another team, I think that it could be at slot corner or it could be at inside linebacker. I think those are the two spots that I look at and say, they may not be done adding there. The Steelers have kind of sniffed around a little bit on some inside linebackers. They brought in Quan Alexander. They brought in some other guys for some workouts. So I don't know that they're done adding on defense. We'll have to see. But Yeah, unique for quality cornerbacks. Absolutely, man. Yeah, cornerbacks. You can't have enough of them, dude. You can't have enough of them. Aiden says Neil will be starting in base, which he will be in the box as they run cover three and cover one almost exclusively in those sets. Yeah, I mean, just the ability to have him in the box as that kind of eighth defender definitely makes more sense than maybe a guy like KZ, who I said, is only like 170, 175 pounds. I think that you can run into some issues with Neil there just because, that could be a tendency breaker for teams where they elect to kind of take their shots deep on first down. But yeah, definitely, I think that he could be a factor in that regard. But I'm excited to see what Neil looks like. I'm excited to hear what he's playing at these days. Because he's kind of switched positions a couple times in recent years. Looking forward to hearing from him at camp. So as far as the safeties go, kind of already hit a little bit on the distribution of labor between KZ and you know, Neil. But I think that Minka's role could also factor in a little bit to some of the changes we see next year. He's been so great in that center field role, and with them moving to more split field coverages, and those two high looks, he's been excellent there. I think I was cutting up all his interceptions from last year, man. I think at least 3 of them came off cover 2, Tampa stuff. I mean, he was so good again last year in coverage, but, they like to do a lot of that, pre-snap disguise where they'll show 2 high safeties, and then they'll end up rolling him down as kind of the robber to take away crossing routes and things of that nature. Play a lot of cover 3 buzz with him coming down in the hook, so I'm excited to see what that looks like, and Minka, they haven't done it since early 2021, but they have used him a little bit in the slot too. If you think back to early 2021, that game against Buffalo, they were having him play a lot in the slot. I don't think that was the best thing for him. He struggled a little bit kind of early in the season that year until they moved him back more into his traditional role. But, it's nice to have a guy like Minka who's so insanely talented and so athletic and so smart that can handle a lot of different assignments just in case, say, they get into the regular season, they get into training camp, the preseason, whatever, and Patrick Peterson does start like looking his age. He's going to be 33 years old, 33, 34, whatever. So it's a nice option to have where you can say, all right, if we got to, we can throw Minka down there, even if it's definitely not the preferred kind of choice. But um, yeah, I think we hit on a bunch of stuff. I don't really want to talk about the quarterback stuff. I mean, Pickett definitely the starter this year. That's exciting. Gonna be seeing a lot more of him in training camp. Mitch, I think it's a clear backup. I think that's what they want him to do, not just this year, but moving forward. Mason Rudolph, I think he's definitely the favorite for QB3. I think that getting Rudolph on the vet min or whatever they brought him back on is a solid bet. The more experience, the more veterans you can surround a young quarterback with, I think is always a good thing, especially a guy like Mitch who's, started over 50 games in the league. I think that's invaluable experience for Kenny. So I'm excited about that. I think a lot of the disrespect, man, if you look at like the betting odds, we talked about that a little bit this morning, but a lot of the betting odds and things like that have the Steelers, projected to finish last or whatever. I think that's a lot of that's just surrounded by, the quarterback discussion. What's Pickett going to be in year 2? And I think that, if he takes the step that a lot of you guys feel like, I feel like everybody in Steeler Nation's pretty high on him coming out of, finishing his rookie season relatively strong over the last month of the year with him showing some growth. If he's the guy that I feel like a lot of the fan base thinks he is, I think the Steelers are going to be getting a lot more national media love pretty early in the 2023 season. So with that being said, I think that's pretty much all I really wanted to talk about. Like I said, I just wanted to get in here and answer any questions that you all have. So if y'all do have any more, drop those in the chat. I'll get to as many as I can before I hop off. I wasn't planning on streaming for very long. If y'all can, please make sure that you hit the like button. Everybody in here, hit the like button, drop me a comment, all that stuff. Make sure you're sub to the channel. All that is greatly appreciated on my end. Like I said, I've really been focusing over the last couple of weeks just on planning out content ideas, what the schedule is going to look like once the season starts. I've got some other stuff in the works that I can't really talk about it really right now, but there's a lot of stuff that I want to do, man. And I'm really excited to kind of share that with you guys once I get all of it kind of mapped out. So, excited about that. So stay tuned. They even played Mika at base cornerback to blow up strong side, heavy zone. Watch Browns and Raiders. Yeah, they did that with Edmonds too. Edmonds got some time at outside corner. I was watching the Browns game when I was cutting up the Mark Robinson stuff, and he was out there playing on the boundary. So it's gonna be interesting to see what happens, man. I think that the Steelers have a lot of turnover on defense, which I think makes for a interesting discussion. They've got some new pieces kind of all around the defense. I think that communication is going to be a big thing that I'm watching. What do the shifts and the motions and the hand signals, what does that look like early in the season with so many new players in the secondary? I think that that's definitely something to watch. Since Minka's arrival, what was that, 3 years ago, I guess now? Since Minka's arrival, they've been so good about preventing big explosive plays over the top. And I think that's been one of the reasons why they've been able to keep themselves into games because they don't beat themselves. And I think that that's something I worry about a little bit this year without Edmonds, without Cam Sutton, guys that were really high level communicators, very familiar with the defense, very familiar with the schemes, the checks, and all that stuff. Um, so I think that's definitely something that's worth keeping an eye on. Any chance the three safety set is best in the league, better than the Cowboys and the Ravens? Um, Maybe. Maybe. I mean, like, I think Mink is one of the best players in the league, period. Not just safeties, but players in the league. So I think if we're just talking about, if it depends on how much you're weighting, one player over the group or whatever. But, I think the Ravens have really good players too. I know Kyle Hamilton's moving into that more of a traditional strong safety role, I think, this year. But he was phenomenal last year in the slot, especially for a rookie. He's gonna be a really good player for a long time. I like what the Steelers have at safety, though. I think they've got some. I think they've got, like I said, one of the best players in the league, Minka, and then I think he's an interesting player too. Ball hawk, can play some different things. He's really good at disguising his coverages. Um, Opportunistic guy, and then I think Neil, you're kind of throwback box player. So I think they've got some guys that can really help them on defense this season. Like I said, I think the big thing for me is just figuring out the communication aspect of it. What does it look like when all the pieces come together? I'm interested to see how much run Tomlin gives the first group together in the preseason. Maybe not important to play, TJ Watt, Cam Hayward at all in the preseason, I don't think. But I would really feel good about letting the secondary guys play together for quite a while in the preseason. And I know that's probably a hot take because everybody's always really worried about the injury aspect of that. But I do think it would be pretty wise to let those guys, play through at least couple series in each game with each other. So appreciate you guys tapping in with me. I'm gonna hop off here. I'll try to do these live streams a little bit more often, at least maybe one more before we head to training camp season. But yeah, appreciate you guys. Again, like the video on your way out, and I will holler at y'all later. Peace.